In this movie, I'll demonstrate how, thanks to our reliance on gradients and global swatches, we can switch out the color scheme dynamically anytime we like. So for example, let's say instead of going with these high contrast colors, I want some warm fall colors like these. Well, as we saw in the previous chapter, one way to approach this project is with recolor artwork. And so I'll just go ahead and click somewhere outside in the origami petals, and then I'll click on a recolor artwork icon up here in the control panel. And now I can see my base colors right here, in which case I could go ahead and switch out the dark blue for the dark purple, and that's going to swap those two colors. And then I'll go ahead and drag the brighter blue onto the brighter purple, and that'll swap those two colors as well. Problem is, we've got a total of 7 colors here, and I'm actually only using 6 colors in the gradients. This top color is actually employed by the outer glow effect. And so if I end up switching this dark blue with that brown, I'm going to make a pretty big mess of things, as we're seeing here. But there's no need to worry because we started with global swatches. So I'm just going to go ahead and cancel out of this dialog box. And instead, I'm going to press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac. That's very important to deselect my artwork so I don't mess it up. And then I'll just go ahead and modify these global swatches here inside the flower colors group. And so I'll start by double-clicking on this first guy, and I'll switch the color mode to HSB, and then I'll just go ahead and change the hue value, let's say, to 355, and the other values are fine as is, at which point I'll turn on the preview checkbox, and I'll see my change applied on the fly, at which point I'll click OK. And then I'll double-click on the next color swatch, and this time I'm seeing the HSB values right off the bat, and I'll go ahead and change this hue value to 20 this time around, turn on the preview checkbox, and I'll see the modifications applied to my deselected artwork because, after all, these gradients are linked to these global swatches. All right, I'll click OK again, and then I'll double-click on this blue swatch, and I'll go ahead and change its hue value, not to 355, by the way, because if I do that and try to click OK, Illustrator isn't mad at me because I'm entering the same values. It's mad because I'm trying to use the same swatch name. And so I'll have to click OK and then either change the swatch name or just go with a different hue value. And I decided on a hue of 350 degrees, turn on the preview checkbox, see it applied to those blue gradients, and click OK. And then I'll double click on the blue swatch and I'll change its hue value to 0 degrees and turn on the preview checkbox, and I have this vivid red, at which point I'll click OK once again. Now, things get even more interesting if I switch out the style of the gradient. And so to demonstrate what I'm talking about, I'll go ahead and click in my artwork like so in order to select that rearmost circle. And then I'll go ahead and select the very bottom fill in the stack down here. And I'll expand my gradient panel, and then I'll change the style to linear. And notice what happens. We start to have this kind of wraparound gradient. And that's going to become even more obvious if I change the location of the middle color stop to 50%, and then I press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and drag that right-hand color stop all the way over to the left. And because I have the Alt or Option key down, I'm making a copy of it. And just for a moment, I'm going to press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac to deselect my artwork so I can modify this first global swatch because, after all, to my eye anyway, it looks too dark. And so I'll go ahead and double-click on it. Make sure I'm looking at my HSB values, take that brightness value up to 50%, turn on the preview checkbox, and now it's looking way too red. And so I'll change the hue value to, let's say, 10 degrees, and I end up with this effect here. And so I'll click OK. And so notice how the gradient is now wrapping around like so in a kind of swirl pattern, and that's because it's being scaled and rotated outward. And then I decided to do something similar with the third to bottom fill right here. And so I went ahead and selected its middle swatch, sent it to a location of 50%, duplicated by Alt dragging or Option dragging the yellow color stop over to the far left-hand side. I changed the type from radial to linear, and I'm not seeing anything happen because I forgot to reselect my artwork. So when you're modifying global swatches, it's very important that nothing is selected, but when you're modifying gradients, it's very important that something is selected. So I'll go ahead and click on my artwork once again to select it. Then I'll click on the third to bottom fill. I'll go ahead and select that middle color stop, change it to 50%, Alt or Option drag the yellow one from the right over to the left-hand side to duplicate it. I'll change the type to linear, and I'll go ahead and switch out the middle color with this darker shade of brown like so. Now press Ctrl-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac to deselect my artwork. So whether you prefer the exclusive radial effect or the alternative linear one, it's an easy matter to change out the color scheme of a dynamic effect that comprises global swatches and gradients here inside Illustrator.